Most people think protecting themselves from a stroke looks like taking their blood pressure medication on time, cutting back on salt, and trying to avoid stressful situations whenever they can. And don't get me wrong, those things do matter. But after having this conversation with patient after patient, in clinic room after clinic room, the habits that actually move the needle and can prevent a stroke from ever happening in the first place are almost never the things that people expect to be doing. Because strokes do not happen randomly. They do not arrive out of nowhere like a lightning strike. They happen at the end of a long chain of events that start quietly, often years before a stroke ever occurs, and that chain is highly sensitive to what you do in just the first hour of every single day. Those first 60 minutes are not the small warm-up before the real day. They are, in many respects, the day. The morning is not just the start of your schedule. It is the window where your heart and blood vessels are most stressed, most fragile, and most responsive to the right habits. And what you do in that window, before the emails, before the commute, before the coffee fully kicks in, it either quietly stacks the deck in your favor, or quietly stacks it against you. I'm Dr. Sophia, a practicing board-certified primary care physician here in the United States. And today I'm going to walk you through a 5-minute morning routine, built from 7 specific habits, that the medical literature keeps telling us is one of the most powerful and most underrated ways to lower your stroke risk. I will show you the exact science behind every single step. I will explain why the morning window matters more than most people realize. And I will tell you exactly how you can start protecting your brain this week, even if you have never thought about your morning as a health decision at all. Before we get into the routine itself, I want to walk you through why the morning is such a critical window. Because once you see this, everything else in this video will make complete sense. You will stop looking at your morning as a neutral piece of the day, and start looking at it as the most leveraged health decision you make. The big fact is, most strokes do not happen randomly throughout the day. The vast majority of strokes, and a large share of heart attacks, happen early in the morning, specifically between the hours of 5 a.m. and 12 p.m., and the reason is not mystery. It is simple, well-studied biology. When you wake up, 3 things happen all at once inside your cardiovascular system. First, your main stress hormone, cortisol, spikes to its highest point of the day within the first 30 to 45 minutes after your eyes open. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it has a real purpose. It is supposed to mobilize energy, sharpen your brain, raise your blood sugar for the day ahead, and then taper back healthy. Cortisol spikes, does its work, and falls. When it does not, cortisol stays high and messy for hours. Second, after 7 or 8 hours without fluid, your blood gets a little thicker and stickier than at any other point in the day. Plasma volume is lower, red cells are slightly more concentrated. The fluid side of blood is in a real sense dehydrated. Third, your blood pressure shoots up sharply, sometimes dramatically, in what medicine calls the morning blood pressure surge. This surge is normal physiology. Every human being on Earth has some version of it. But when the surge is too large, or when it stacks on top of an already stressed cardiovascular system, the morning surge becomes one of the strongest predictors of stroke risk in all of medicine. And almost nobody is doing anything specific to manage it. The data here is striking. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Clinical Hypertension found that an exaggerated morning blood pressure surge was associated with a 49% higher relative risk of stroke, a 40% higher relative risk of heart attack, and a 29% higher relative risk of sudden cardiac death. Other landmark work has shown that every 10 mm mercury increase in that morning surge raises stroke risk by roughly 22%, even in people whose clinic blood pressure looked completely normal to their doctor. Work by Kazuomi Kario, one of the leading hypertension researchers in the world, has repeatedly shown that morning systolic blood pressure is the single strongest independent predictor of stroke events among every measurement window studied, including clinic readings, 24-hour readings, awake readings, sleep readings, evening readings, and pre-awake readings. So the morning is not just one of several risk windows, it is often the dominant one, and the habits I am about to walk you through are designed to soften the morning, to put your blood pressure, your cortisol curve, your blood viscosity, and your vascular responsiveness into the most favorable state possible, before the demands of the day can act on them. Now I am going to walk you through each of the 7 pieces of this 5-minute morning routine. And I want you to pay very close attention to habits number 1 and number 4 on this list, because those 2 are the ones that genuinely shock most of my patients when they first hear them. Habit number 1 is to drink a full glass of water before anything else. After 7 to 8 hours without fluid, your blood is slightly thicker than at any other point in the day. Thick blood moves more slowly. It is harder for your heart to push through the vessels. It is more likely to clot. And clotting inside the arteries that feed the brain is the direct cause of the most common type of stroke, which is called an ischemic stroke. This is the stroke that happens when a clot blocks blood flow to part of the brain. Studies on morning blood viscosity have shown that within about 20 minutes of drinking a meaningful amount of water, measurable changes start to occur in how easily your blood flows through small vessels. Roughly 500 milliliters, or about 16 ounces of plain water, taken before coffee, before food, before email, before anything else, is enough to begin moving blood back toward its healthy baseline viscosity. Room temperature or cold water both work. Skip the lemon, skip the salt, skip the pink powder, just water. And this one habit honestly takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and it starts protecting you immediately, that same morning. Habit number 2 is to get into some real morning sunlight within the first 10 minutes of being awake. Most people think morning sunlight only affects your mood, your energy, or your sleep later that night. But the cardiovascular connection runs much deeper than that. When natural daylight hits your eyes within the first 10 minutes of waking, it sends a clear, bright signal to a small but powerful part of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, your body's master clock, sitting just above where your optic nerves cross. When that signal fires correctly, your circadian system locks in. Your cortisol spike rises on schedule, does its job, and then comes back down within about 45 minutes. Heart rate variability improves. Blood pressure follows a smoother curve through the day. But when that morning light signal is missing, because you woke up in a dark room and went straight to your phone, or straight to the coffee maker, that early cortisol spike tends to stay elevated and dysregulated all day long. And chronic daily cortisol elevation raises resting blood pressure. It increases inflammation inside your blood vessel walls and makes your platelets stickier. All three of those directly raise stroke risk over months and years. The research is clear on this. A study published in the journal Physiology and Behavior found that bright morning light exposure significantly reduced plasma cortisol levels, while dim indoor light produced almost no effect at all. Other circadian work has tied robust morning light exposure to better nocturnal blood pressure dipping, which by itself is a major protective factor against stroke. Step outside within 10 minutes of waking, even on cloudy days. Outdoor light is far brighter than indoor lighting, often by an order of magnitude. 2 to 5 minutes is enough. Try not to wear sunglasses, because the signal needs to reach your eyes directly to fire reliably. And if it is dark or below freezing outside, sitting by a large east-facing window for 5 to 10 minutes is the next best option. Habit number 3 is something most people have never heard connected directly to stroke risk, and that is to breathe only through your nose during morning movement. Whether you walk, stretch, do gentle mobility work, or any kind of light morning exercise, how you breathe during that movement has a direct measurable effect on your stroke risk profile. Here is the mechanism. When you breathe through your nose, your sinuses, particularly the maxillary sinuses, continuously produce a small molecule called nitric oxide with every single breath. That nitric oxide is not just a curiosity, it is one of the most important vasodilators your body makes. As you inhale through your nose, that nitric oxide travels directly down into your lungs and into your bloodstream. Once in the bloodstream, nitric oxide tells the smooth muscle in your blood vessel walls to relax and open up, which actively lowers blood pressure. And it does this at the exact moment of the day when blood pressure is at its most dangerous peak. When you breathe through your mouth, very little of this molecule is produced. The nitric oxide that nasal breathing delivers is essentially lost. A 2023 study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology, from a team at the University of South Carolina, found that acute nasal breathing lowered both mean arterial pressure and diastolic blood pressure compared to oral breathing, even at the exact same exercise intensity. The body was doing the same work, but the cardiovascular response was meaningfully softer when the mouth stayed closed. So during your morning walk or movement, keep your mouth closed. Slow your pace down if you have to. Nasal-only breathing gets easier within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice as your CO2 tolerance improves. Even just 5 minutes of nasal breathing during morning movement produces real, measurable benefits to blood pressure and vascular tone. Habit number 4 is one of the strongest single interventions we have on this entire list, and it almost never makes the headlines of health media. And that is to eat your protein first, before any carbohydrates, at breakfast. The order in which you eat your breakfast matters just as much as what is on the plate. Here is what happens when you get the order wrong. When you eat carbohydrates first, like toast, cereal, a bagel, or pastry, your blood sugar rises rapidly within minutes. That fast rise triggers a large wave of insulin to flood your system. And that insulin surge does something most people do not associate with stroke. It turns up your sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response, the same nervous system branch that is already running hot in the morning because of the natural cortisol spike and the natural blood pressure surge. Stacking an insulin spike on top of an already stressed morning cardiovascular system is something I see constantly in patients with poorly controlled morning blood pressure. They are doing everything else right. They are on medication, they are sleeping well, but every morning their breakfast is silently amplifying the very surge their heart does not need amplified. A landmark 2015 study published in the journal Diabetes Care by Louis Aron's group at Weill Cornell Medicine found that eating protein and vegetables before carbohydrates at the same meal produced significantly lower post-meal glucose excursions and meaningfully lower insulin responses compared to the standard American order of carbs first. Other replication studies have shown that simply reversing food order at a meal can reduce post-meal blood sugar by roughly half in people with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. What this means for stroke is direct. Eating protein first blunts the blood sugar spike. That blunts the insulin wave. That lowers the morning fight-or-flight response, and that directly lowers blood pressure at the moment of the day when it matters most. Try starting every breakfast with protein. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or smoked salmon all work well. Eat at least half of your protein portion before you touch any carbohydrates. In practice, this looks like eating 5 to 10 solid bites of protein first, and then moving on to the toast or the cereal or the fruit. Habit number 5 has some of the strongest direct stroke prevention evidence on the entire routine, and it is also one of the most overlooked interventions in modern medicine, and that is to eat a nitrate-rich food at breakfast. Certain vegetables, particularly beets, arugula, spinach, and celery, are packed with natural compounds called dietary nitrates. When you chew and swallow these foods, friendly bacteria on your tongue, particularly species in the genus Veillonella and Actinomyces, convert those dietary nitrates into nitrites. Those nitrites are then converted by your body into nitric oxide, the same powerful vasodilator molecule that nasal breathing produces, but through a completely different biochemical pathway. And unlike nasal nitric oxide, dietary nitrates keep converting into nitric oxide for hours after you eat them. The long-term stroke evidence here is genuinely strong. A major prospective study published in the journal Stroke, the official peer-reviewed journal of the American Heart Association, found that for every standard deviation higher intake of vegetable nitrate, there was an associated 17% lower risk of ischemic cerebrovascular disease over a 14.5-year follow-up period. Other large cohort analyses have shown that moderate vegetable nitrate intake is consistently associated with roughly a 17% lower risk of ischemic stroke specifically, in addition to lower risk of ischemic heart disease and heart failure. And the short-term evidence is just as compelling. Multiple controlled studies have shown that drinking beetroot juice or eating cooked beets directly lowers systolic blood pressure for 1 to 2 hours after consumption, sometimes by 5 to 10 millimeters mercury. That is not a subtle effect. That is comparable to a low dose of medication. What you want to do is simple. Add a small handful of arugula, baby spinach, or cooked beets to your breakfast, or drink a small glass of beetroot juice in the morning, which is now sold at most grocery stores in the cold juice aisle. And one small but critical note, do not use antibacterial mouthwash right before or after eating these nitrate-rich foods. Antibacterial mouthwash kills the very bacteria on your tongue that convert nitrates into nitric oxide. A major controlled trial published in the journal Science Translational Medicine showed that twice-daily use of antibacterial mouthwash actually raised blood pressure in healthy volunteers within a week, because it disrupted the oral nitrate-to-nitrite pathway. Habit number 6 is 5 minutes of slow, intentional breathing before you leave your house in the morning. Most people think slow breathing just helps with stress and makes you feel calmer. And while that is true, it does something else even more specific for your stroke risk. The key is to make your exhalation noticeably longer than your inhalation. When your exhale is longer than your inhale, your diaphragm stays low longer, your vagus nerve is stimulated, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, and your blood vessels relax. 5 minutes of this technique measurably changes something called heart rate variability, the tiny beat-to-beat differences in your heart rhythm. in a way that lasts for hours after you stop the practice. Heart rate variability matters enormously for stroke. Multiple peer-reviewed studies, including a 2025 meta-analysis published in the journal Frontiers in Physiology, have shown that reduced heart rate variability is independently associated with poorer functional outcomes after stroke, higher mortality, and increased risk of cardiovascular complications. Low heart rate variability is essentially a marker of a cardiovascular system that has lost its adaptive flexibility. Slow breathing, on the other hand, systematically raises heart rate variability. Multiple controlled trials, including work published in journals like Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback and Frontiers in Public Health, have shown that slow-paced breathing at around 5.5 breaths per minute increased heart rate variability and improved baroreflex sensitivity within just 4 weeks of daily practice. The baroreflex is the reflex that keeps your blood pressure from spiking every time you stand up or get stressed. Improving it is one of the cleanest ways to soften the morning surge. What you want to do is breathe in through your nose for about 4 seconds, and then breathe out slowly through your mouth, or through your nose if habit 3 is now solid, for 6 to 8 seconds. Do this for 5 minutes before leaving the house. And here is the part I love. You can stack it directly with habit number 2. Just stand or sit in your morning sunlight, do this slow breathing, and you compound the cardiovascular benefit in the same 5 minutes. Sunlight on the eyes plus slow nasal exhales plus early cortisol regulation, all at once. Habit number 7 is something you can actually track over time to see real progress, and that is to check your morning blood pressure after about 20 to 30 minutes of being awake. This feels passive, but honestly, it is not. It is one of the most active things you can do for your brain. Here is why. A single blood pressure reading, taken at your doctor's office at 2 in the afternoon, tells you almost nothing about what your blood pressure is actually doing at the most dangerous window of your day. People with completely normal clinic blood pressure can still have wildly exaggerated morning surges at home. And those surges are exactly the ones that predict stroke. Research published in the Journal of Hypertension has found that morning blood pressure surge predicted stroke risk, even in patients whose clinic blood pressure looked completely normal to their physician. Landmark work by Cario found that morning systolic blood pressure was the single strongest independent predictor of stroke events among every blood pressure measurement window studied, including clinic, 24-hour ambulatory, awake, sleep, evening, and pre-awake readings. Knowing your own morning number is not scary, it is protective. It is the difference between catching a dangerous pattern at home early enough to fix it with simple habits and finding out about it during an emergency room visit. Try to check your blood pressure within the first 20 minutes of being awake, before medication and before coffee. Sit quietly for 5 minutes, feet flat on the floor, back supported, arms supported at heart level, and take 2 readings 1 minute apart. Record the average. Do this most mornings, and over weeks you will start to see the direct impact of the other 6 habits on this routine, in your own numbers, in your own home. Now, you do not need to do all 7 of these things perfectly on day 1. In fact, please do not try to. Start with just 1 or 2, the ones that feel easiest to slot in. For most people, that is either habit 1, the glass of water, or habit 2, the morning light. Try those 2 for about 4 weeks until they feel automatic. After those are locked in, layer the next one on top, one at a time, then the next, then the next. This compounding of small morning habits is what truly saves lives. The literature is unusually clear that stacking lifestyle factors together produces risk reductions that no single habit can match alone. Recent large prospective cohort work has shown that combinations of healthy behaviors, including daily movement, plant-forward eating, blood pressure awareness, and consistent sleep, were associated with up to an 80% lower stroke risk compared with those doing none of them. Even partial adoption of these factors produces meaningful benefits, with well-conducted analyses putting realistic stroke risk reductions in the range of 40% or more for people who adopt most, but not all, of these morning anchors. That is why I can say with real confidence that the 5 minutes a day you invest in this routine could realistically cut your stroke risk by up to 40%. Because you are not buying one trick. You are buying 7 evidence-anchored interventions, each hitting a different one of the mechanisms that drive a stroke, all deployed in the exact window of the day where that drive is strongest. Thinner blood, lower cortisol, higher nitric oxide, better insulin response, higher heart rate variability, better baroreflex, and your own data, every morning, to keep you honest. If this video changed the way you think about your morning, and specifically how it can protect your brain and lower your risk of stroke, please consider subscribing and share this with someone who may genuinely need to hear it. If you want the complete roadmap covering the right foods, the right exercises, and the evidence-based supplements to optimize your metabolic health and longevity, I put all of that information together in a completely free resource called the Metabolic Blueprint. You can grab it through the link in the description below. Finally, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. This is from the Book of Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22 and 23.